So are you struggling to learn Agile and what the most important topics are for your PMP exam? In today's video, we're reviewing the top 30 Agile vocabulary terms that you need to know so you can pass your PMP exam on your first try. Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Alvin and I'm here to help you become certified in project management. So in today's video, if you've skimmed through the PMP exam content outline, you know that your exam has a much stronger emphasis on the Agile framework, which means that you need to understand the terminology and the key vocabulary and how this is applied in situational based questions. As you watch today's lesson, I recommend that you pause the video anytime we're reviewing each term and see if you can recall what it means. First, pause the video, ask yourself, what does this term mean? Recite it to yourself, and then resume the video by hitting the play button and then compare your answer to mine. Your goal by the end of today's video is to identify which Agile terms do you need to focus more of your effort on studying. Rewatch this video as many times as you need to so that these Agile vocabulary terms become second nature to you. So with that said, let's get started with reviewing the top 30 most important Agile vocabulary. The first term is Agile. Agile is an iterative approach to deliver a project. In contrast to the popular waterfall and traditional predictive approach, Agile delivers the product to the customer in incremental steps. As a quick tip from me, I like to think of Agile as being much faster than waterfall, since Agile focuses on releasing a minimum viable product to the customer instead of having to wait until the end of the entire project management lifecycle. The next term is Agile Release Planning. This term might sound confusing, but it's actually quite simple. It provides a high-level overview and the timeline of your software's release schedule based upon the established product roadmap. The next term is the burn down chart. When you see this vocabulary term, what's the very first thing that you think of? Make sure that you do not confuse this with the burn up chart because you will definitely see this on your PMP exam, so make sure you get this correct. The burn down chart is a visual chart which tracks the amount of remaining work through the number of story points which are completed in an iteration. This helps you analyze your team's velocity and also to forecast a projected completion date for completing your remaining work. To keep it simple, just remember that the burn down chart is a type of graph which shows how much work is remaining and still needs to be completed. Now let's go through the definition of the burn up chart. As I've mentioned previously, the burn up chart sometimes gets confused with the burn down chart. The key distinction here is that the burn up chart is a visual graph which shows the work which has already been completed to release your product. So make sure you understand this key difference because you might see a situational based question that tests your knowledge of either the burn up or the burn down chart. Our fifth term is caves and common. This sounds very similar to what it sounds like, so let's review it. The caves in common is a term that's used to describe a team's workspace or a common area to help facilitate collaboration, discussions, and co-location. Think of a cave as a quiet, isolated area and commons as a common area for the team to meet together in the workspace and to help facilitate collaboration with different team members. The next term is continuous integration. This sounds confusing, but all it means is the following. Continuous integration means that you're frequently incorporating the work into the entire whole and you're retesting the product to confirm that it still functions as intended. Our next term is the cumulative flow diagram. This is a stacked area graph which tracks your team's work which is being completed on the project, and it helps identify where there are bottlenecks. The way I think about this is that this is a visual chart which shows the total amount of working items, those which are in progress and those which have been completed. The daily stand-up, also known as the daily scrum, is one of the scrum ceremonies that you need to be very familiar with. This is one of the top most common frequently seen vocabulary term regarding Agile. It is a daily meeting facilitated by the Scrum Master every day for 15 minutes that the team uses to discuss and address three questions. What did I do yesterday? What is the plan for working on today? And what impediments are you experiencing? A good way to distinguish the daily stand-ups from the other Scrum ceremonies is that it is a short daily 15-minute huddle held at the same time and same place to help facilitate communication and uncover any roadblocks. The next term is flow-based agile. What this means is that the team pulls features from a backlog based upon the team's actual capacity to begin work. In other words, features are delivered as soon as they become ready instead of from a time box schedule. The next vocabulary term is iteration-based agile. With iteration-based agile, the team works in iterations to deliver the completed features. And keep in mind that with iteration-based agile, the iterations are each of equal duration. Our next key vocabulary is the minimum viable product, or the MVP. If you have ever used Agile before, this is one of the most common terms that you should know by heart. The term minimum viable product refers to creating a product which has the minimal amount of features, but still allows your team to obtain feedback from customers as soon as possible. This is important because it allows the team to determine how to improve and adapt for future iterations. Our next term is mobbing. Mobbing is a technique that's used by the entire development team where everyone deliberately works on the same task at the same time. So for example, they work on the same user story or same task to drive increased focus and to push through completing the work. Everyone is occupied with this one task, and this ultimately prevents any handoffs and wastes. Think of this as the next level version of swarming, which we'll be covering later. Pair programming is our next Agile vocabulary term. This is a technique used when one programmer writes the code and another person inspects the code while it's being written. This allows one software developer to watch another software developer create code and catch any issues while it's being performed, which results ultimately in higher quality of code that's being created. Let's go on to our next definition for planning poker. Planning poker is an estimation technique that's used during sprint planning to estimate the effort required to complete each user story. To estimate the effort, the team uses playing cards with numbers written on them based upon the Fibonacci sequence of 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. For example, assigning a user story a 3 means that it takes as much work as 1 and 2 combined. Product backlog is another term which is something you need to know for your PMP exam, as you may see it either being referenced in your answer choice or in the question itself. For your PMP exam, make sure you understand the difference between the product backlog and the sprint backlog. Unlike the sprint backlog, the product backlog contains all of the work required to complete the entire product. The sprint backlog, in comparison, only contains the work for the upcoming sprint. The next term is the product owner. Make sure you understand the role and the responsibility of the product owner and differentiate this against the Scrum Master and each member on the development team. The product owner plays a very critical role in the Scrum team since they represent the customer on the project and are the ones responsible for understanding the customer needs, requirements, and prioritizing the product backlog. As I've mentioned previously, the critical role that you should definitely be familiar with in terms of roles and responsibilities is the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is another very important person on the Scrum team who is responsible for leading the team to implement the Scrum process and acting as a servant leader to help remove any roadblocks that the development team is experiencing. Keep in mind that on your PMP exam, the exam may mix the Scrum Master role as an Agile project manager. Just understand that the key role of a Scrum Master is to facilitate, coach, mentor, and guide the team to follow the Scrum process and the Agile framework. One other very important thing to note here is that the Scrum Master does not prioritize or create the sprint backlog or the product backlog. Moving on to our next term is the word spike. A spike is a short time box window to vet out and experiment with technical options and to gain more knowledge. There are two types of spikes that you should be familiar with. A risk-based spike, which is a time box window to investigate and remove an issue, and an architectural spike, a time box window which allows the team to write enough code and explore using a new technology. The next term is what's called a sprint. Think of a sprint as a time box period of time ranging from 1 to 4 weeks and it's during this window that the team completes the work that's found within the sprint backlog. As an exam tip, I like to think of a sprint as literally a sprint in which the team sprints over the next 2 to 4 weeks to develop the features from the sprint backlog. Our next term is the sprint backlog. This is a Scrum artifact, which essentially is a list of features to develop for the next upcoming sprint. Keep in mind that this list consists of prioritized items pulled from the product backlog, or in other words, the most important features to work on. The sprint planning meeting is used to plan and determine what features will be prioritized and created in the upcoming sprint, and this ultimately results in the development of a sprint backlog. The next critical term to understand is the sprint retrospective. As we go through this definition, do not confuse the sprint retrospective with the sprint review. The sprint retrospective is a meeting that's held near the completion of a sprint to review the team's performance and determine what went right, what went wrong, and also to conduct a lessons learned. As a personal exam tip, the retrospective is not used to provide the customer and the product owner feedback about the product increment. Instead, the sprint retrospective is focused on improving the Scrum process and identifying ways to improve the team's performance for future sprints. All right, our next Agile vocabulary term is the sprint review. The sprint review occurs near the end of each sprint and is used by the customer to perform an inspection to review the development increment. This is the time when the customer and the product owner review the created product increment and confirm if it meets the user needs, as was previously established for each user story. If you're getting a lot of value out of today's video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel to see more videos like this to help you pass your PMP exam and become certified in project management. So let's go on to our next vocabulary term. This one is a story point. A story point is a metric that's used to estimate the level of effort and the difficulty for fully developing a user story. In other words, it's a number that says, what's the amount of effort and the difficulty with completing this task? Swarming is our next Agile vocabulary term and definition that you need to understand. This is a collaborative technique used in Agile development teams in which the team may swarm and work together on completing several stories at the same time. Think of this as the next level version of pairing to complete a user story or to resolve an issue. The next term is the team velocity. This is actually really easy to understand as it's used to estimate how fast the team is working, meaning based upon the team's speed, how much work can we estimate to complete during a sprint. The next term is what's called the technical debt. Technical debt is a backlog of work that's caused by not performing regular cleanup and poor coding, and all of this is solved through refactoring. Keep in mind that Agile teams should aim to minimize technical debt as much as possible. Our next Agile vocabulary term is called t-shirt sizing. Similar to planning poker, t-shirt sizing is a high-level estimation planning technique that's used to estimate the effort and how long a story will take to complete. For example, you would assign a t-shirt size to each feature, where XS, or extra small, is used to represent the smallest amount of work, and XL, or extra large, represents the highest amount of work. The next term is user story. This is a concise description of a feature that's described from the perspective of a person who is requesting the capability. It typically follows the format of, as a type of user, I want some goal so that some reason can be accomplished. So for example, a user story could be, as a customer, I want to access my shopping cart so that I can make purchases in the mobile app. The next term is waterfall, also known as the traditional project management approach. This is a must-know term for your PMP exam, as you will need to understand the differences between the Agile and the traditional waterfall approach. The waterfall approach is used when projects flow sequentially from one stage to the next. Projects are planned extensively in detail at the very beginning before the subsequent stages can take place. Think of waterfall as following a strict plan and a completely defined set of requirements. Making changes to the product as it's being created is not as welcome using the waterfall approach as it is when following Agile, due to the large amount of scheduled delays and costs which are associated with the potential rework and scrap. So here's the final comprehensive list of the top 30 Agile terms that you need to master for your PMP exam. Leave me a comment down below and let me know which Agile term did you have the most challenges with studying and remembering. If you click or tap on the screen, you'll learn my next tip with learning Agile and how to master the differences between the Agile and the predictive approach. Good luck studying for your PMP exam, and I'll see you in the next video.